Hello, fellow enthusiasts! Get ready to indulge in a delightful compilation made exclusively for you. In case you missed any of the captivating stories that captured your imagination this week, fret not, we've carefully curated the most entertaining tales to keep you thoroughly entertained. If you find yourself enthralled by these stories and crave more, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. By doing so, you'll never miss out on the latest updates and the most fascinating narratives that await you. Oh, and here's a little something to enhance the viewing experience for others. Don't forget to leave timestamps of your favorite moments in the comment section. Sharing these timestamps allows others to easily navigate to those particular stories and join in on the excitement. Women, what flirting technique actually worked on you? Viewers Edition. Story 1. I'm not bi. I thought I was bi. It did for a long time, and I gave dating a shot. That explains the profile picture. I had this profile picture for years. You can get a romantic relationship to develop from a well-established friendship, but I only lost friends because of this. Losing friends because I found their romantic approaches uncomfortable and rejected them. I thought I liked men. It turns out the kind of man I liked was my type, and I thought what a man was doesn't actually exist. I was attracted to a fantasy. I don't understand men. The unknown of men scares me. Women are a dilemma, so after figuring out that I don't like men, I began to question, am I a lesbian? The answer is no, because even though I can see myself in the future settling down with a girlfriend or a wife and have a far better understanding of women, I know what a woman is. I know the deal that I'm getting into, but I don't like to be romantically approached. While I still have desires to have fun in the bedroom with someone, so I don't think I'm ace, being a transgender girl, let's just say I don't have the right equipment to fulfill my desires. I don't enjoy it. Story 2. Bro, flirting is the easy part in my opinion. Well, for me at least. I seldom had trouble striking up a conversation or getting a girl on a date, but I am terrible at escalation, probably because I was raised without a father. But I have this inner insecurity about physical escalation. I've missed so many girls like this. Feels bad. Once at a party, I was chatting and dancing with a chick, and at some point I invited her over to the side where there was a leisure corner that was a bit quieter, and there were couches to chill on. So we keep talking, maintaining eye contact, and I am so caught up in my mind as to what my next move should be that I literally must have spaced out for a brief moment, because when I came to my senses, I noticed that she is now so close to my face that our lips are nearly touching. Still didn't kiss her in the end. Totally missed it. Well, I was kind of messed up on all sorts of drugs and alcohol, but don't be that dense, brother. Story 3. Sadly, I don't have any great success stories, but I have some great failures. I was once invited to a party where the majority of people were from my friend's dance school. As any super stiff dude surrounded by professional dancers would do, I stood in a corner drinking. This hot girl approached me and started asking where I was from and how I had ended up there. Then she asked if I wanted to dance, and I explained I was terrible at dancing, but if she took the lead, I was all game. We danced a bit, and the party was about to end, so she asked me if I wanted to come with her to her place for an after-party, then winked. I was drunk and at the moment did not understand anything. I answered sure, but as I said, I'm here with my friend, so I should ask him if he feels like partying on. As I turned to my friend, she disappeared. I don't think there was a party. Story 4. The fear of rejection is what holds people back. Just saying it never hurts anyone. It might lead to stuff, or even dating. Who knows, maybe she liked you too. Or maybe even would look your way when it wasn't like that before. Doesn't happen all the time. Regardless, it never hurts to just say it. Unless it is hard for them on the rejection side, or it's complicated to go there for any reason, that would be different. Also goes to the individual if they want to proceed or leave it be. There are ways to go around that. One is to not let it get to you and getting hit that hard. The other is to just go for it and talk to them to not allow it to be awkward or whatnot, and to resume the way things are, like it never occurred. But that still goes into if they were for it or not. At least you tried, and let them know how you feel. Story 5. 2 kinds of lines work for me, music or video games. Was at a party at my friend's house. I'm a socially awkward, socially anxiety-ridden, geeky dude, so I spent most of the party in a corner playing Pokemon on my DS. A guy comes over and asks what I'm playing. I tell him and he goes, "Can I get a peek at you so I can show you my moves? Harden, Protect, Pound, and String Shot." I blushed and said, "As long as I can show you how to be the very best like no one ever was." He retorts, "Well, prepare for trouble." I said, "And I'll make it double." We got it on and dated for 4 years, and he was my first time. 14 to 18 years old was the best time of my life. Story 6. I don't talk about it much because people online are vicious, but I was the one who was at the movies and asked my date if she wanted a kiss. I bought Hershey's Kisses just so I could try that out and tried to save face by clarifying that it was chocolate and not actual kissing. I've never been as smooth since, and for some reason scored after telling my depressing life story to my now fiancé. I also predicted something that came true 30 minutes later, but she swears up and down that wasn't why she fell so hard. But anyway, I had a child a year and a half later, and the rest is up to the universe. Story 7. I find these stories fascinating because I actually hate flirting. I hate getting hit on. It makes me angry, sad, and scared, all at the same time. I despise it, any kind of flirtatious behavior, or asking me out on a date, or asking me to go to bed. I will reject you immediately. It's going to make me freak out, and I'm going to be disgusted by it. I hate it. So hearing the stories of these flirtatious acts that actually worked and people have liked it, I am beyond amazed. Had to stop watching about halfway because I'm just too disgusted. The stories are fascinating, but gross. Like really yucky. What is the most awkward accidental physical contact you've had with the opposite gender? Viewer's Edition. Story 1. I was the stage manager for my theater class in high school. The previous day, I assisted the costume head in measuring the actors, but on this day, the costume head wasn't there, and one actor still needed to be measured. Since everyone else was busy and I knew what to measure and how, I was sent to measure her. So we went to the theater room, where the measuring tape was. It was also completely empty and far away from everyone else, and I had to measure her. She was a few years older, and while I'd known her for a year, and we'd worked together before, we were never that close of friends. It was awkward. She was wearing a crop top and shorts, and I had to measure tightly around her neck, shoulders, waist, hips, legs, and chest. We both tried to act as if it wasn't weird, joked about the process, and talked about previous experiences getting measured, and then I had to take the measurement I'd been dreading, the inseam. I asked if she knew what it was, and she had forgotten. So I had to explain how to put the measuring tape up and in between her legs, and then I had to get down on my knees in front of her to measure to her ankle. Having to hold the measuring tape against her body while she tried to stay still was extremely awkward, and I didn't want to weird her out or seem perverted, as this was already uncomfortable for us both. When we finished, we returned to rehearsal, and everything was fine, but I still can't stop feeling awkward about it. Story 2. All the neighborhood kids are swimming on a hot day in Florida in the pool. I just wanted to dive and swim around or jump in. My friend wanted to push me in, but her hand slipped off my back, and I only lost my balance, but also I accidentally grabbed and flung her into the pool instead. Turned out I ripped her top off by accident in front of all our parents. Her mom told me to run home, so I did, with my father not really knowing what happened. We still joke about it like 15 years later. I'm on break from college and not doing too well mentally. I met up with a close friend and met his neighbors, whom one of them found out she was getting cheated on by her then-boyfriend. We were all chatting, and as the only two that didn't need to go to class or work the next day and just wanted to get out, she invited me over to hang out. I legitimately fell asleep on her couch and woke up to her in only a towel fresh from a shower. I didn't know what to make of the situation, as she was looking at the TV before she left to go to her room and just dropped the towel by the door. She came out dressed later, and we chatted, and then she found out I'm actually celibate. She blushed hard and apologized and realized how awkward and the lack of communication there was between us, and just honestly chatted after that. We're still great friends, though. She moved away to California. Story 3. I'm a triathlete, and I was out on my bike in winter. It was getting dark, and even though I have lights, it was getting extremely cold too, even for winter. So I decided that I would take the train back home. This story is probably easier to understand if you know the layout of the seats in German trains. While I was standing there with my bike, one of those two girls, who were my friends, who were sitting there on the side seats, started to pick dirt away from the kind of muddy rear tire of my bike. She didn't know that I'd noticed, but I thought I'd just let her do this, because even though it's completely pointless, it also won't hurt my bike, and if she has fun doing that, why not? I even overheard her whisper to her friend with a grin in her voice that she just needs to clean them. Guess she was into bicycles. I also guess that she probably was so focused on her cleanup job that she didn't realize where her hands started to go, 'cause suddenly I felt a pinch in my leg right below my butt, followed by a surprised, "Oh, you didn't just do that," sigh sound from her friend and a sorry from her. At first, I was kind of overwhelmed by that situation, but I think this is kind of hilarious. I was as dirty as my bike, and I guess she wanted to clean me too. And yes, I still look back at that and think that I probably missed out on great wife material. Story 4. Happened to me once, but only I was feeling uncomfortable, I think. So this girl was sitting behind me. We sat like the furthest from the teacher desk. I don't know why, but she always walked forward and then walked past behind me. I got to move my chair inwards to give her space to walk behind me to go to the teacher. Well, so at this one time, I remembered letting her pass me, but then the teacher was talking about something, and I was too focused on the teacher, so focused that I didn't see or hear her, but I'm pretty sure she said, "Excuse me." And, well, I kind of placed my hand on the back of my chair to help my body turn to face the teacher. So, yeah, was listening, then suddenly felt her behind, brushed against the back of my hand. I was so freaking embarrassed and lost focus on the teacher. Looked at her, but she didn't look like she cared or anything. I'm dead sure she knew what just happened and felt it too, but she looked so fine with it. While I'm there freaking out because I kind of touched a girl's behind. Happened when we were 12. But yeah, was a chicken and didn't really dare to apologize for not hearing her and feeling that. By the way, yeah, no, I'm dead sure that girl didn't have feelings for me, so yeah. That's what happened quite a while back, but I can't get the feeling of that and the embarrassment out of my head. Story 5. A really awkward situation that happened in high school. I was shipped with my best buddy, Joe. Not his real name, but that was the best I could come up with, because apparently I'm always seen around him everywhere I go, which is kinda true, but I just have a hard time speaking to others in my class. We were just chilling, talking to each other in the class, when this one annoying classmate ran around the room and accidentally bumped really hard into Joe, pushing him towards me and knocking some chairs, making a really loud noise. I felt like I had the air inside my lungs pushed out. Certainly wasn't a pleasant experience, falling onto your back on the cold, hard floor. Everyone in the class turned around, looking at me and my friend in the middle of knocked back desks and fallen chairs, with his hands on my chest, pinning me to the ground. Let's just say that the guy that bumped into Joe never apologized, was being cheered by some other boys, while the girls were kind of just squealing and screaming stuff like, "I told you they were together." I faked sick to not go to school for 2 days because I was so mortified by that single moment. Even now, when I think back about it, I just want to curl up into a ball and scream into a pillow for how awkward it was. Story 6. Well, I'm probably never going to say this otherwise, so here it goes. At my job, there's a small hallway where we go to place boxes in the back to get picked up. I work in shipping. I had just finished setting down a box and got up to walk back out front, only for my coworker and friend to be walking in. My hand brushed against her stomach, and her face ended up inches from mine. I'm a male, by the way. I honestly see her as a sister, but nonetheless, the good Christian boy in me was completely embarrassed. While I was apologizing profusely, she started laughing. I'd never been more relieved. Another time, she was arguing with me that I hadn't taken my lunch break, which I often shrug off for a couple of hours, and I was going back to work at the register when she blocked the way with her arm. I ran into her again, and she was relatively close to me. She then proceeded to gently whisper, "Please, just go take your break." Just to reiterate, I see her as a sister now, but I'm too embarrassed to say at the moment I found her assertiveness a little attractive. I just stood there for a second, completely flabbergasted, before I barely started out the words, "Okay," and went to eat. Really messed with me. Story 7. I was at a sleepover last year, about 10 guys and one girl I have a crush on. We were playing Truth or Dare, but because we have no creativity, we used an app that gave the truths and dares. It was the girl's turn and she picked Dare. It said she could close her eyes and everyone should take turns giving her their hand, and she had to guess whose hand it was. It was fine, although probably quite awkward for her, and I was the last in line. So I gave her my hand, trying not to make it too weird. Not necessarily accidental, but certainly awkward. I didn't think of it at the time, but looking back on it, I think they might have been setting me up with her because they knew I have a crush on her. since we exchanged our crushes at the previous sleepover where there were no girls, but they probably didn't because that would be pretty cringy. We were all 14 and 15 at the time, so none of us were drunk. I'm good friends with the girl and have held her hand a few more times after, although never romantically. Still have a crush on her, but probably won't have a relationship with her. People who have been in a coma for a long period of time, what news really shocked you when you found out what happened? Viewers Edition. Story 1. Not really a coma, but it was under anesthesia for a surgery as a kid, and I stayed asleep for about an hour extra than what they were expecting. I've never been one for getting good sleep, so I think my body was just taking the chance to get some more rest. Nothing weird there, but it was waking up that was strange to me. I remember waking up the first time and asking if everything went okay, and I looked at where they did the surgery. I had to get circumcised for medical reasons, and I saw a massive blood-covered bandage covering that area of my body. Probably the most scared I've ever felt. I remember fainting at that point because my memory cuts off, like my eyes shut, and then another memory happens an hour or so later, but apparently I never went back to sleep. The next memory is me asking if I can get up to go to the toilet, and I remember my parents asking if it was okay, and they said it was at that point. I got out of bed but dropped to the floor as my legs weren't working. I remember going, "How?" and laughing, and then start to feel a panicked feeling because my legs literally wouldn't move. They were fine, just coming out of anesthesia can make it hard to move your body. My memory just cuts off and comes back again later. Apparently this happened entirely differently as well, because apparently the nurse asked for me to go pee because they needed to check if everything was still working. I got up, like I remember, and my legs didn't work. I said ow and laughed, and then the nurse rushed over and picked me up and checked me over to make sure I didn't just mess up the surgery by falling on it. That must be where the panicked feeling comes from, but I don't remember it happening, just the feeling of getting scared. Next memory is me peeing into a toilet, and it feels like it happened right after the last memory, but it was around an hour later to wait for my legs to work, and I was just sat there waiting that entire time, but no memory of that. Anyways, I peed in the toilet, remember feeling excited, and I'm guessing that's because I was able to go home, if I was able to pee okay. But I don't remember knowing that then, I just know that now. Story 2. I've told the story before, but my mother was hit by a drunk driver when she was 16 years old. Her first boyfriend was with her in the car, and his life was ended. The drunk driver had just a few scratches, and no jail time, go figure. Mom's body was shattered, and she was in a coma for 6 months. Even her neck vertebrae were broken, and I know from my aunts that at 1 or 2 points, her heart even stopped. You wouldn't know it from looking at her now. She wasn't supposed to live. Or if she did, they said she would be a lifelong quadriplegic vegetable. Obviously that didn't happen, or I wouldn't be here. They also told her she would never have children. She had 4 of us after meeting and marrying my dad. The one thing that did stick was permanent retrograde amnesia. She had no idea who she was or who her family were. Her parents had given away most of her things, as she was expected to pass away, so she basically had to restart her life and her identity. The fact she made a complete physical recovery after her body was broken that badly is nothing short of a miracle by any standards. Her lost memory, a handful of body scars, and some partial dental implants from lost teeth are all that remain of something so dreadful. Yes, I have been accused of making this up before. No, it's unfortunately no lie. Even people who knew her for years never realized it until I mentioned it offhand. They're free to ask her, and she has some minor scarring around her upper lip and on her neck from the track that she had to put in at the time. I've seen photographs of the wrecked car and news articles about the accident her sisters kept and sent her. I've seen pictures of the boyfriend whose life was ended. The drunk driver got virtually no punishment, and I hope he lived with the memory of his actions for the rest of his life. As for Mom's memory, it took decades for any of her old life to begin to resurface. She remembers a few bits and pieces of her lost childhood now. She remembers the day of the accident, to a point, not the accident itself. By and large, who she was before the accident is permanently lost. Story 3. I was never in a coma, but I had a nasty case of mononucleosis when I was in 7th grade. On the Friday before spring break, I went to school, But I was really tired. I didn't eat lunch and just dragged myself through my day. When I got home, I told my parents I was tired and didn't want dinner and just wanted to go to bed. It was about 4 p.m. Friday. No sooner, from my perspective, did my head hit the pillow than my parents were knocking on my bedroom door. I said, "I told you I'm not hungry. I just want to sleep." They said, "Son, it's Saturday afternoon. We just wanted to check on you." I went back to sleep, and from my perspective, I had just nodded off, and they're banging at my door again. My father wanted to check on me. I didn't realize it, but my parents were scared poopless. I was just tired and wanted to sleep. They made me get up. They made me get a drink of water. I refused food. Monday, they woke me up and took me to the doctor. I slept most of the way there, and I remember getting a blood test, but I just wanted to sleep. Every day for the next week and a half, they'd wake me up. I'd drink some water, sometimes pee. I didn't drink pee. I would sometimes actually pee myself. I think I ate 3 bananas and a couple of slices of bread. Then I'd go back to sleep. It just felt like I was constantly getting woken up and not getting sleep. I was shocked when almost 2 weeks passed before I could feel like I slept and could stay awake for more than a few minutes. I managed to lose a lot of weight during that time. Mono is the best diet I've ever been on. It literally is, you snooze, you lose. Story 4. From what I've been told by my mother, a doctor described me as a guy walking in and out of comas. I know I suffered many head injuries in my youth, but never thought anything was wrong with me until my mother and some old friends would ask me or talk to me about things I have no memories of, while they would insist they'd happened, and I was there. I'm now 30, and I still lose large chunks of time. The only difference between what I'm experiencing and the typical coma is that my life seems to continue going on without me needing to go to the hospital. Huge portions of my life I've had to learn about being told after the fact, the number of times I've made plans to go see a friend on a set day, only to then wake up some day after the planned day all upset because I think I've missed my chance to see them. But when I'd message to apologize for not showing, I'd be told how I had been there but acted abnormal, with no context past that, has all left me in a position where one day everything can be seemingly fine, then the supposed next, I'm hearing of how I did this or I did that and screwed up nearly all my friendships, with next to none of them ever talking to me again, or at least telling what it was I did. It's become safest just to stay at home, where the worst I can do is upset my family. But at least they know and understand what's going on enough to, at the bare minimum, put up with me. This all really sucks because this is no life that's enjoyable to live. Story 5. I was in an accident on my motorcycle. I know it's hyperbolic to say that I broke every bone in my body, but it would be faster to list the bones I didn't break. My left leg was severed and reattached, and I went through 14 surgeries to piece me back together again. I was in a coma for just over 7 months. It was getting to the point that the doctors were telling my family I was never going to wake up, and they had some difficult decisions to make. My mom heard about a drug trial for a drug that was supposed to stimulate the brain activity in coma patients and enrolled me in it. 3 hours after the first treatment, I woke up. My muscles had atrophied, and the tendons and ligaments in my body had shrunk in disuse, so I could not move at all. I was really confused, didn't know where I was, and wasn't really conscious enough to realize the people around me were doctors. I did remember the crash, and since I couldn't move, I was terrified that I was totally paralyzed. After a few days, I became more lucid and began to understand what was happening. The whole time I was in a coma is just a big blank. I remember nothing. It was like the crash knocked me out, and I woke up a few minutes later, took over a year of physical therapy to even stand on my own, and I still can't walk without a crutch. I'm lucky to even be alive, but I will never be the same again. Story 6. Not gonna lie, dreaming about a certainly different life is a common occurrence in my teenage life. I woke up and immediately tried to find my child. I don't have a child. I was just a 16-year-old teenager who just got back to school after chickenpox. It wasn't a good experience. I was in a state where I cried seeing babies, always wanting to hold them. I felt like I'm going insane. I never liked kids or babies in general and never planned on having one. But that dream messed me up. I still remember getting pregnant, giving birth on a specific date, and causing a problem because it was a festival. I kept getting repeated dreams of losing my child until when an additional dream came, It all ended with me trying to CPR my newlywed husband, who was still in his suit, and me in my simple wedding dress. Crying in those whole messes as time went by that I realized he's unalive and can't be saved. Still have some problems regarding that. I can't seem to stop getting affected, and came crashing down again when my cat passed away before the year 2022 ended. I'm sorry it wasn't that detailed. It's not that I forgot. I just got tired when people called me weird for talking about it. And it's not like I could meet my husband and my child. Aries in this life, it's just a dream. Good thing it's just a dream. I didn't lose both of them in real life. It's not like I'm with them either. I just don't know. Story 7. Hearing some of these stories makes me remember one of my dearest friends. He was in a coma, so this was close to my last few years of high school. My closest friend, who we all nickname the human car because he was born with a health disease which causes his organs to not grow with him, so he has to get his body parts swapped every few years, so he has to go in for a tune-up, meaning something in his body had to get replaced, so he wasn't in school for a while. We found out afterwards from his girlfriend. It was my classmate who was in a coma. A really bad incident happened at the hospital. I believe they put a new kidney in it. First accepted the body and everything went fine, and then he went into shock and went to a coma for 3 or 4 days. When he came to, when I heard from my friend, he was so disoriented. He thought that the surgery went well, and it didn't. They had to get another kidney. Sure enough, they did in the second one. Thank goodness, because the scariest things with people who have certain types of diseases that your organs cannot grow with, you can be dangerous at times. And thank goodness he survived. Now, I don't know where he is today, but I have a feeling he's still getting his annual tune-ups. Sorry I have to say that. Story 8. I had these kinds of dreams, too, multiple times. One at around 23, I dreamt of being with my sister-in-law. We were watching a kid with bad eyesight play. I loved the girl as my family in that dream, and we talked about her eyesight problems. But my sister-in-law had no daughter at the time, and I wasn't even thinking about kids yet. Then, at 26, I got a baby girl with cataracts. She's visually impaired and had only 15% sight. She's 6 now and doing great. Another one I had when I was around 10, I dreamt I was taking a walk in the mountains with my older brother and parents. We lost our way. At some point, we were at a crossing. One led to the car, the other was a long trip around the canyon, and we had already walked for hours. About a year later, I went on holiday to France, and we went for a walk around a canyon. We lost our way, and at some point we came to this exact crossing. My parents thought the road towards the canyon was the right path, but I demanded we take the other path. My parents didn't believe me when I said I had already been here, but still took the path. About 10 minutes later, we found our car. What is the greatest completely legal loophole that you know about? Viewers Edition. Story 1. I ran across this accidentally about a decade ago. I did some computer setup work for a charity. They didn't have much money, so in lieu of payment, they gave me ownership of a few shares of the charity. The idea being that in a few years, after the charity had grown and become worth more, I could donate the shares back to the charity and take a tax deduction for the donation. I didn't really understand this at the time, but the charity owners and I trusted each other, so I agreed. A few years later, I donated the shares back to them. While preparing my taxes that year, something just seemed off. To understand, first you need to understand what a tax deduction is. When you get a tax deduction for X amount of dollars, the government is just saying that you don't owe income taxes on the X amount of dollars. So if you donate X dollars to a charity, you don't have to pay taxes on that. It's like you never earned that money, and instead it went straight from your employer to the charity, completely bypassing you for income tax purposes. Because of this, it's impossible to make money from a tax deduction. Since tax rates are always less than 100%, the amount you donate, money you gave away, always exceeds the reduction in your taxes, money you gained from not having to pay taxes. This wasn't happening. If I'd sold the shares for X dollars in cash, then I would have an income of X dollars that I would need to pay income taxes on. But by donating the X dollars in cash to the charity, I would get a tax deduction for that amount, and that would free me from having to pay income taxes on the amount, and thus my donation would be tax-free. But I'd still owe taxes on the rest of my income. But by donating the shares without selling them, I was getting a tax deduction for that amount, even though I never received that amount in income. So the deduction was reducing the rest of my income by X amount for the purpose of calculating my income taxes, resulting in me having to pay lower taxes than if I'd sold the shares and donated the money. That is, it allowed me to make money, at the cost of the IRS via a tax deduction. Two seemingly identical transactions with very different tax consequences. I asked several CPAs and a tax attorney about this. They researched it, and all of them told me, as strange as it was, it's correct and 100% legal. The light bulb came on a few years later. Zuckerberg set up a charity that he controlled, then donated a bunch of shares of Facebook to the charity. That got him a big fat tax deduction for the value of his donated shares, hundreds of millions of dollars, even though he still owned the shares, just via his charity now. He didn't owe taxes on hundreds of millions of his regular income due to the tax deduction. Exactly what I had experienced times a million. This whole thing is a loophole inserted into our tax code to allow rich people to dodge taxes. It must still be in effect because Musk just did it. Story 2. Let me tell you the story of a man I fondly refer to as the GameStop millionaire. I was a manager for GameStop back when they started a program where you could buy Amazon gift cards as a print-off code in store. A customer figured out that he could go through Amazon's site to buy GameStop gift cards from the JetBlue portal, the airline, basically bought an Amazon card from GameStop once, then used it to buy a GameStop card online, then used that to buy another Amazon card from us. Over and over, racking up free airline miles. After a couple of visits, we convinced him to get a PowerUp Rewards card. This gave him rewards points from GameStop with every purchase on top of all that. Points that could be cashed in for $1 off coupons for GameStop. He quickly raised the amounts involved and even got his wife doing it as well, collectively gaining over 1 million rewards points. We did some rough math and he could have bought every collectible in the store without paying a dime out of pocket. He literally did most of his Christmas shopping with us that year. This is where the exploit was discovered, and we were told by corporate to kindly request he stop the process. But at the time, no rules were being broken, so they couldn't outright stop him. Eventually, they did freeze his rewards account from collecting more points, citing some vague rule, most likely new, about abusing the point system. He still had access to his existing rewards last I was aware of, and shortly after, the Amazon card program was shut down. Story 3. For the timestamp 2850, yes and no. First, do not drag them anywhere at all. You're just tampering with a crime scene that wasn't a crime scene until you did that. And in any state, the only time you can end the life of another person is when you are completely 100% positive that if you don't end their lives, then they will 100% end yours if you don't. Or if it's in the case of a kidnapping or red rum of a third party, and shooting them is the only option to stop this. And shooting them with intent to just injure them is not a legal action in any U.S. state to stop them from ending your life. The part where ending their life comes in is when they say you start shooting and take their hand off and they're unarmed. Well, if you stop shooting, they could sue you, so you should follow the training you never had and stay terrified that they're still a deadly threat and keep shooting. So what happened was he pulled a gun on me and I knew my life was over, but I had to try and maybe I could survive getting shot, so I started shooting back and fired until my gun was empty. Warning, you are responsible for everything you shoot. And I'm not really sure what the frick happened, and I don't know if I'm alive or unalive right now, and just having the part of unaliveness where your life flashes before your eyes. So, officer, if I'm alive, I don't know how it's possible. You should have a story like this, and it needs to be true. This is not legal advice and is meant to show that ending the life of a person on your porch and dragging them inside is red rum. Story 4. To the Walmart comment, first to know is that neither the state nor the police makes the rules for roadways. That would be the Department of Motor Vehicles. Also taking note of what capacity the police are in. If they're in the public capacity, then they can't enforce anything on private property. Doesn't matter what contract law they have made unless you agree to them. This is all states. Side note, just remember symbolism is very much a thing in the USA and words do not mean what you think they mean in Black's Law definition. Example, when a judge cites a contract law, then says the punishment, before asking, do you understand? What he did was say a verbal contract and asked, do you stand under my rule? Do you understand? That is why they are on a podium above you. Also, unless you fully understand what I'm talking about, don't you, you're going to get thrown through the ringer. A great example in Michigan is 257.42, which is what police can do for public roads, in which it says only 257.255 and 257.215 can only be enforced with respect to commercial drivers unless driving for fiscal gain. You don't need insurance, plate, tag note, just a title with proof of no lien, which falls under 257.49a. A recreational vehicle, been arrested 6 times and released each time. Granted, even though I'm correct, I've had to sit in jail, lose jobs, etc. for knowing the actual laws granted. I'm not wasting money each month on insurance. Got the cops trained on this after 5 years, but still was a headache prior to getting there. Story 5. My favorite pizza place closed down shortly after the following story occurred. It was like a Subway where you could just pick the kind of crust you wanted, only one size, one price, but different crusts. Then, like the Subway, you went down the line requesting as many ingredients as you wanted at no extra cost. My favorite was half pizza and salad, where they made the salad the same way, so it can be a huge meal by the end of the line. A big salad. But that's not the coolest part. They had a tap wall where you exchanged your valid ID for a bracelet that would operate the tap wall, where you could pour up to 32 ounces before you would need to request a refill. That way they can assess if you should continue being served alcohol. I really enjoyed pouring myself tiny samples of just about everything they had, almost 24 different taps. My favorite was a red chili hard apple cider, but for some reason that tap kept failing to charge. I dropped in 2 or 3 times each week and notified them on 3 separate occasions over the course of about 6 weeks that their tap was not charging. But they never did anything about it, other than the first time when they put an out-of-order sign on it for the rest of the day, but never again. And 2 months later, they were suddenly out of business. I'm not sure if that was the cause, but I literally sat there and watched dollars being poured down the drain for 6 weeks. I'm so bummed they're gone. They had the best anchovies I've ever had. Story 6. On Story 35, for Texas, that only works for break-ins in the actual home, and on the first instance of it happening on record. A few years ago, we got caught in a funny situation where the same group of people kept stealing parts off our vehicles in our driveway. Wasn't in the house, and after the first 911 call, police report, any attempts to trap the vehicle or stake out and wait for them would fall under premeditated, and dismantling the parts we knew they wanted and leaving it out for them was considered an attractive nuisance, which you get a fine for. All we were told we could do by the police was call if we heard them out there and wait for them to show up. But of course, by then they were always gone. Engaging with them was considered vigilantism. It took 19 visits from them and multiple sawed-off and stolen pieces of our cars before we finally caught them and it stopped. I saw a story similar to this on a true crime show that took place in an actual home. The same 2 people kept breaking in. The police wouldn't do anything. The guy staked me out with a gun and shot them both unalive next time they broke in. They got convicted for red rum. Wild stuff. Story 7. Britt here. The guy with the castle was out of order, and very simplified, I'll explain why. Planning permission exists to protect people from the nearby construction of buildings that decrease the value, enjoyment, privacy, etc. of their home. The time limit on complaints exists to protect owners of structures from vexatious litigation. For example, I buy a property at a lower price because it's near to a construction, then try to get it removed to increase the value of my property. He exploited legislation that is there to protect people, but it's worse. He did it on protected green belt land. Allowing him to keep it would have destroyed the various protections in place and opened the door to all kinds of exploitation and harm. He went through lengthy legal appeals, lying his head off throughout, and spouting his entitlement until he eventually deconstructed it after being told the alternative was prison, and it would still need to be removed. He had to pay all the costs. Personally, I think they might have done better to just prosecute him for criminal damage to Greenbelt land and promptly bulldozed it. He obviously knew it was an illegal structure, but rich people getting away with things is nothing new. Camp counselors, what is the weirdest thing you've seen happen at camp? Viewers edition. Story 1. At camp I went to, there was a counselor who got gang attacked by 40 kids, all around 5 to 8 years old, and those little mustards tackled him and ripped his pants off and stole his pants. He was fired for exposing himself to kids. He was charged, but I found out he was not convicted because his defense attorney got a copy of the videotape from the police because the camp had security cameras, and he not only got off from the charges, but sued the crap out of the camp for not giving him a single person to help him watch dang near 80 freaking kids all by himself. I was one of the very kids that was not crazy, putting themselves in danger. Heck, they allowed all the kids into the grassy area that was not fenced in, and if they allowed that stuff now, the camp would have been sent straight to heck by the parents. Many parents actually went back to the counselor and tried apologizing for their children's actions, but he was having none of it after those ran through the court system and through heck. He was one of the best counselors ever, and only 40 kids physically attacked him and even broke his arm and gave him a severe concussion, and he had dozens of bite marks from kids literally biting him, and some of them drew blood. The head of the entire place got a new head counselor who did not take any crap from anyone, and that woman I respected. If you attempted to tick her off, your butt was done. She fired anyone who even attempted to do anything against her will. She turned that place into a child-safe camp that was also extremely fun. She actually played with us and even taught us to play well together, and we were even able to play games like tag football, where you had to pull the ribbon on the other person or even capture the ribbons to where your team had to take the other team's ribbon to win, and she was skilled. She literally had the tags placed on her ankles and wrists and waist, and all 200 of us kids just had to get one off her to win, but she had to take all 4 off each kid to win. She won all 500 times we played against her. It went from horrifying near death of a counselor by monsters to salute the Supreme Commander because you did not want to tick her off. She actually liked me and allowed me to be all alone in a room stacking the chairs, which also gave me the chance to be the first to have snacks. She set up pizza parties for the kids for lunch, and I was allowed to set up the tables and chairs and get my own pizza and chips and soda first before all the other kids. It's probably because she trusted me more than anyone. I may have been a bit of a teacher's pet as a kid, so much so that the vice principal of my middle school gave me 1 copy of the key to the bike rack. 3 people had keys to that bike rack: the vice principal, Fred the monitor, and myself, a 6th grader, who had that key until my last day of 8th grade. Oh, the power I held as a kid in middle school. I had to give that key back in 2004, but I had the key to the school, and if any kid ticked me off who also rode a bike, their bikes were locked in. I had one kid who cussed me out and insulted me. He called his father, and his father came to yell at me and demand I unlock the gate. I told his father the kid was a brat and cussing me out and being a brat, all because I wanted to finish my chess game, and he could not wait 2 minutes for me to have finished the game and to go open it for him. I also locked it 5 minutes after school ended, which was right before I went to go to the chess, because I knew that some kids did not have bike locks, and during school, I would lock up the bike cage, and kids who came late would require a key. It was for protecting the other kids' bikes. Because of the cage, many kids did not want to carry a heavy bike lock with them, and knew the cage would keep the bike safe. And yeah, you were not going to break that cage. The lock was not a master lock, but some weird lock from Japan, and it even had "Made in Japan" written on it. It would have been near impossible to pick it. Well, when I told the kid's father what happened, he scolded the kid and told the kid that he would have to walk back to school on Monday to get his bike after school before he could ride home if he apologized, and I allowed him to get his bike out. This was on a Friday and screwed up the fact that it was his brand new bike and he was going to go riding with his friends on a camping trip to dirt jumps, and he sold his old bike to a friend of his father who got it for their younger son, so he had no bike. The dude was completely messed up for the weekend. He actually got on his hands and knees begging for my forgiveness, but the messed up fact was I forgot he ticked me off because I was too busy playing video games. I opened it and he got his bike and rode off. The word got spread to not tick me off, and no one who rode a bike ticked me off after that, and in fact, they were very scared to do anything wrong because they did not want their bike sealed away. There was no way to steal the key because the key was on my lanyard on my neck with the other keys, making my lanyard weigh about 10 pounds. Yeah, I may have a bit too many keys on my lanyard at times. If I get attacked, that thing is like a swinging mace. Whoa, okay, that was a ride. I guess moral of the story is, if anyone ever asks you whether you would rather fight 40 child-sized humans or one adult-sized human, definitely opt for the one adult-sized human, because the 40 child-sized humans evidently leads to a very convoluted series of events. Story 2. I ain't a camp counselor, but my story's wild all the same. Oh, and I'm 12, just so you know. Alright, here's my story. I can't share this story on my animation channel until I'm 18, so at least I can share it here. I started going to sleepaway camps around 2 years ago. My first year, I was bunkmates with this pretty obese kid. We'll call him Bob? Yeah, Bob. Anyway, I got to camp and he was the first kid I met. I thought he was a potential friend. I liked him for about 30 minutes. He was very weird, mostly with food. I will never get the image out of my head when he took an Expo, scribbled on some chips, threw them on the ground, stomped on them, then scooped them all up and ate them. And the worst part was that his shoes were caked in mud. Muddy Expo chips. Gross. He was very entitled. After 2 days, I befriended basically the entire cabinet except for him, and for the next 3 days I was there, because I was only staying for a week. He would constantly say that random stuff that either someone or no one owned was his. Like, that tree is mine, or I hate my bed, let me use yours. He was so annoying. So to get back at him, I stole his beloved rock that he painted to look like a hamster. He tortured all of us trying to find it. Oh shoot, I've been talking about my first year at that sleepaway camp for too long. Here's the actual reason why I've typed all of this. Last year, I asked for very specific people in my cabin. I literally got the exact opposite. All of my old friends went into one cabin, and literally the only person I didn't want in my cabin was in my cabin, Bob. Now that I think about it, I'm very glad he was in my cabin. Then I wouldn't have known about this situation. Anyway, this year he just out of the blue revealed that he was bi. Nothing bad about that, but for some reason, he was worse than usual this year. Maybe he thought that now he revealed he was bi, he became himself, a psycho pervert Karen. He would hit people, spank literally anyone, and be just very entitled little fat witch. But one day he did something out of the blue, and this just wasn't the icing on the cake. No. This was the entire barrel of icing. Here it is. There was a little room in the back of the cabin, probably the size of a big closet. He decided to make it his own room. The first sign was Bob's Segs Dungeon. Like, bruh, you gonna really name it that? That's just really weird, kid. He renamed it to Bond's Casino, though. And he traded those bands that, friendships bracelets. Anyway, there was this small kid in our cabin. He was a bit quiet and kept to himself, but everyone liked him. Bob probably liked him a bit too much, if you know what I'm saying, because one day he decided to freaking R the small kid. I mean, not R, unless you call dry humping with clothes on, and forcefully doing it R. Bob freaking humped this kid. In most countries, that is probably a little bit of R, which is very illegal. My friend told me all this at lunch, and Bob actually tried to do it to my friend too. Luckily, he escaped. The small kid went home out of traumatization, and Bob stayed for about 2 more days before the counselors actually did something, which was send him home, and not accept him back. So now he ain't coming back. That's my story. A long story, but a good one. My parents found out and were furious. They made sure that Bob is never going back. Hopefully. The end. If any of you are a stutterer, then come on down to good old Camp Say, a camp for stutterers. Story 3. The weirdest thing I had seen while counseling was when a 4th grade boy in my cabin had a crush on another one of the counselors, so we had the crush talk in the cabin the night before. So the next morning, while we have to get everyone up and ready for breakfast, as I'm trying to get everyone up, another counselor walks by and says, "Good morning." This was the counselor that the boy had a crush on, so he shot up and walked outside to go talk to her, and as he's talking to her, another kid in the cabin shouts he has a crush on you. So she blushes and starts to walk away. But now here's the thing that he says that made her start to gag and run away. So he says, "Don't worry, I have experience with girls." That made her run away gagging. But then as he walked back into the cabin, another boy said, "Ooh, you got rejected." So what he does is he runs up to him and punches him in the face. Also, the whole thing about the counselors is very much so true. Story 4. I'm not a camp counselor, but when I was in Boy Scouts, we had an incident during our week-long summer camp where late at night a small group of drunk people ran into the small dock right by our campsite with their boat. Some of the older scouts, they were about 14, 15, 16 at the time, saw this and immediately started taunting and heckling the drunk people. This ticked them off. They got out of their boat. One of the older scouts said, "Hey, come and get me," as he's standing about halfway up the steep hill with one of the drunk guys right below him. Drunk guy grabs this kid by the leg, pulls him down, and starts beating the crap out of him. The others that were with him jumped down to help him, and a full-blown fight broke out and lasted for a minute or two until the scoutmasters had to come down and break up the fight. Story 5. Camp counselor, full-time. This summer we had some really wild stuff go down as usual, but the craziest stuff was one of the camp counselors broke into one of the boathouses, hooked his phone up to the giant speaker over the side of the building that they play chill music over while the kids go sailing, and blasted Playboy Cardi at 3 a.m. across the lake, so that basically the entire camp heard it. Safe to say he didn't last very long. I would have said it was something sensual, but that stuff is so frequent at my camp, it's almost lost its shock factor. Ladies, what is the most obvious hint you've dropped that went unnoticed by a guy? Viewers edition. Story 1. I read some internet comments a few years back and watched a video like this one on male SA and R victims. In many cases, for some reason, the men and boys couldn't get themselves out of or prevent a situation. One boy was 13 and at a sleepover at his friend's house when in the middle of the night his friend's mother came and brought him to her room. He was confused and didn't know what to do, so he just did what he was told. Another story I read was about a college man who went to do homework with a female friend of his. I wouldn't have put myself in his situation personally, but he didn't do anything technically wrong at her dorm. She eventually crawled on his lap and started undoing his pants. Despite him saying no firmly 3 times, she would not stop. One woman in the comments tried to insinuate if he didn't want it, he should have pushed her away. Many other people on the internet and myself explained to her in an extremely irritated manner that the man did mention he literally froze, not knowing what to do, and how if he had done that, she could have flipped the story back against him for violence or SA. Many of the other stories occurred by women drugging men, or waiting until a tired man falls asleep, then climbing on like they're on a horse, then the man wakes up to this woman on top of him. If not drugged, he can easily get away, but in the cases where they drugged him, he typically can't get away. One man who was drugged was lucky to have this girl's boyfriend come home right in the middle of the act, and then thankfully he could tell by the dashed look on the poor guy's face that he was not in his right mind. He helped the guy get his girlfriend off him and his arm around the guy for support and walked him down to his car and drove him home, apologizing for her behavior. Needless to say, that boyfriend broke up with her for it, and then he testified in court on the man's behalf. Apparently, they became really close friends even until today after the experience. A news station published a story on Facebook about a woman who broke into her ex-boyfriend's house and threatened him with a machete if he didn't do it to her. He did because she had a weapon and he didn't. There were women in the comments actually praising her for this disgusting and despicable act. She was arrested and likely charged for this. As you can see, many of these stories involve drugs, blackmail, or taking advantage of a man who is tired, young, or unsure what to do. This makes sense as men on average are stronger and more capable of overpowering women, so you would expect to see men being more overtly aggressive with the perpetrator of SA or R, and for women to be more tactful, using other methods that give them greater control of the situation, like the aforementioned methods when they're the perpetrator of SA or R. I honestly don't think for men or women that it's as simple as not putting yourself in a bad situation. Many of the stories that I mentioned were not bad situations to begin with. The man wasn't walking through the Chicago hood with $1 million over his head. Yes, obviously, for both men and women, it's important to teach safety and situational awareness, but not every situation can be avoided, sadly. Sometimes the only way out is to do everything you can to survive, and even then it's a risky situation. More so if you're about to be trafficked. Or in a situation of R, there may not be an escape. You could be drugged and unable to move, or tied down and unable to break free. As for tolerance, if a woman touches me accidentally, I don't care. If she walks straight up to me and puts her whole hand on a provocative part of my body, there's no reason to tolerate that. That was 100% intentional and inexcusable behavior, period. Also, I don't want to believe all men any more than I want to believe all women. Men and women are both people, and thus both capable of lying. I don't want to potentially ruin the life of a man or a woman through any false accusations, which sucks because evidence isn't always available, and even when genetic evidence from a male assaulter is available, it's not always reported and a sample taken. Many female victims don't come forward out of fear and feeling disgusted and or violated. Even fewer male victims come forward because it's not as accepted in society that men can be hard, and they're often told to man up, or that he could have enjoyed it, or you're just a lucky man, etc. Or like in one case where a man went to the hospital after waking up to a woman on top of him without any consent to get tested for STIs. The nurse went to get the doctor and a bunch of other nurses and brought them over, explained what happened, and they all started laughing at him. As if we needed more evidence that people don't care as much about men as they do women. I'm not saying that everyone treats men badly. Most even do not, but on a societal level, it feels like there is some bias, even with fellow men. Then again, with identity politics, straight white men are the scum of the earth, even if they're the kindest person you ever met, simply because they're part of the patriarchy and the descendants of the colonists. I think we all need to do better as a society at treating people better regardless of skin color, genitalia, values, or political opinions, as long as they're not physically hurting people and respond appropriately to the situation when someone is physically or mentally harming someone else. Story 2. I get it. I've been made fun of for being a virgin before. I just don't believe in doing stuff before marriage, and am not exactly expecting that to be in the cards for me. It's mostly people my own age that are not Christian, people who are older and married, or that are fellow Christians typically understand. Through them, I don't usually outright say that I'm a virgin, but I am fairly certain it's obvious that I am. I've never been popular with women, and the ones that have liked me were mostly immature or had a mental illness of some kind. There was one in high school that I realized after graduating may have, but I don't really know. I wish women weren't confused and just said how it is, like men do. Like, how am I supposed to know you're interested if you don't make it obvious? Even if you don't want to be direct, you can at least do something that points towards getting to know me. I also had people that thought I was gay growing up until they saw me lose my mind over a girl for almost a year. By losing my mind, I just meant I went out of my way to talk to her, nothing more. I'm just not open to everyone about my sexuality. I don't really flirt. I've really only flirted with one person, aside from just a couple lines with some rando on Snap, just to see what it's like, and I wasn't really 100% into the situation. But it was a good friend because we were so similar, I wanted to see if there was anything there. I don't publicly flirt or point out anything, and I can't get caught checking girls out, as I do it extremely tactfully. I observe from a distance, blending it with my awareness routine so it just looks like I'm looking around, and I do not look at butts or boobs. I just think that's rude. It's not that I'm not attracted. I check out the face, hair, and overall figure. My dad keeps not so subtly reminding me that I'm the last heir of the family and I need to pass on the name. Hard to do for a guy that's invisible to women, that lives in a world where women have been encouraged to be promiscuous and take half a guy's stuff. Obviously not all. I know there are some wonderful virgin women out there, but the odds are I'd want to buy a lotto ticket before I put money on it. I don't even believe in the lotto. I think it's morally wrong to throw money away in gambling. Story 3. Many comments in this section are statements from guys telling girls that hints are not the way to go and not to bother with them. These comments are, of course, completely correct, but I have a comment for the gentleman here. Guys, do not go for the girl who refuses clear communication and instead insists on dropping hints. There are several reasons she would do this, and all of them are bad. Number 1, first and most commonly, she is painfully insecure to the point of being self-absorbed and never wants to risk anything, even for someone she supposedly likes. You will spend your entire relationship with her dealing with this, and she will never stop questioning your love and demanding you prove it constantly. Through herself, she will be extremely reluctant to show you much love at all. Such a relationship will leave you feeling never good enough, and is a massive drain on the body, mind, and soul. Number 2, she is enamored of the old-fashioned concept of a lady should never make the first move, or some such. This in and of itself may not be a bad thing if she's genuinely traditional, but that's extremely rare these days. She'll expect all the traditional trappings from you to be the breadwinner, be the initiator, defend her with your life, etc., but will almost certainly not do anything traditionally feminine, cook for you, clean, keep the house, be readily available for doing stuff in the bedroom, etc. If you find one of these unicorns that does all these things, great. But most of us guys know that we aren't so lucky. Number 3, she likes playing power games. Communicating clearly leaves her no room for plausible deniability, and she needs that to keep yanking your chain. She could be stringing you along for multiple reasons. It could be just feeding her ego, or perhaps you're the nice guy that mows her lawn for free, and she wants you to keep doing it. Or she just wants to keep her options open, no matter how selfish that is. I shouldn't have to say why this sort of girl should be avoided. Number 4, it's a genuine trap. She, for whatever reason, is trying to lure you into doing something she can use against you. Maybe she's ticked off at you for any reason at all. Maybe she just enjoys this sort of cruelty. Maybe it's revenge for something. Who knows? Again, should be obvious, but do not engage with these monsters. Story 4. So I'm 29 and have not dated or really had any form of relationship with a woman in about 7 years. I have had a good few women take interest in me, or I have taken interest in them. The big issue I have experienced with a lot of the women that like me, or that I like, is that in 90% of cases, they have a boyfriend. I know there are women out there that like to jump from boyfriend to boyfriend and not have downtime between relationships. It's common practice to flirt and get to know someone before you jump ship. I don't like to do that, so usually when I find out through a friend, their Facebook, talking to them or whatever, I stop talking to them. For me, it's because I have been cheated on before and don't want to put someone else through that. The other 10% that I like usually kicks off great and conversations go well, but because I prefer to take things slow and get to know the person first, they usually lose interest in me fast. It tends to result in a pretty quick shift of personality as well, from my experience. They act interested in everything, and then the next day they don't want to talk to me anymore or acknowledge I exist out of the blue. So for me at this point, it comes down to 3 questions in my head. Number 1, are you just trying to ditch the guy you're currently with? 2, am I just a distraction, or are you genuinely interested? Number 3, I think you might be the one. So far, only one woman has fallen under that third question. That was the woman that cheated on me. C'est la vie. Hopefully someone else will fall under the third question in the future. We'll see. For now, I have a future I'm working towards, and my time is limited to commit to dating. Doing so would just result in me being unable to spend any time with that person. Story 5. I had a crush on one of my med school classmates who was also a salsa dance partner. She had recently called off her engagement to an abusive partner. Couple of months later, her. I think Asian guys are cool. I'm not sure why they don't date me. Me, an Asian guy. One of life's greatest mysteries. I didn't pick up on it because I was too frightened to fail out of med school. Later on, I tried jumping out of the friend zone, and that was an epic fail. But at least I got closure with her before I left for residency. Her. I liked you, but I wasn't sure where we would end up with residency. When I came back a year later to see friends in her class graduate, she ran up to me at graduation, I was actively trying to avoid her, and hugged me and asked what I was doing that graduation night, which was going out dancing. I point blank asked her what about her new boyfriend, and she just shrugged. So later that night, she shows up at the dance place in this tiny black dress, and she whispers in my ear, "Where are you staying?" So I gave the hotel I was staying at. Me. Where's your boyfriend and your family? Her. Oh, they're sleeping. Oh, really now? One of my friends who I brought out to dance, he told me that after that, she didn't dance much, out of character for her, and then was eyeing me for a good half hour, and then left, also out of character. Well, shoot, I am not playing homewrecker. She's now married to another guy, and they have 2 boys. I'm glad I never got her back to my hotel. That would have really messed with me. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.